This is the moment everything changed for the Trump family. Tuesday morning, 8:34 a.m., February 10, 2026. Federal Judge Sarah Martinez signed an order that sent shockwaves through Mar-a-Lago. Ivanka Trump's passport seized, her international travel blocked, her business empire frozen. If you looked at the federal courthouse in Manhattan that morning, you would have seen something unprecedented. Security doubled, media trucks lined up 3 blocks deep. Inside, behind closed doors, a testimony was being delivered that would tear apart one of America's most powerful families. Ivanka Trump, already facing mounting legal pressure, already dealing with congressional investigations, already watching her father's political machine struggle, has just been blindsided by testimony from someone she trusted completely. Her former chief of staff, a woman who sat in every meeting, signed every document, knew every secret, and she just told federal prosecutors everything. In this breakdown, we're going to reveal what was said in that closed-door session, show you the documents that prosecutors are using to build their case, expose the financial trail that investigators have been following for 18 months, and explain why legal experts are calling this the most significant development in Trump family legal battles since 2024. Because this isn't just about one seized passport. This is about a pattern of conduct that prosecutors argue shows deliberate deception at the highest levels of American business and politics. Hit that subscribe button right now. This story is breaking as we speak, and you need to stay ahead of what's coming next. Like this video so more people see what's actually happening while mainstream media is still catching up. Let's go back to March 2024. Ivanka Trump announced she was stepping away from politics to focus on her family and private business ventures. The plan was simple: distance herself from the controversies surrounding her father, build a legitimate business portfolio, stay out of the headlines. It was supposed to work. She had the connections, the capital, the brand recognition. Industry analysts predicted she would transition smoothly into private sector success, following the path of other political figures who'd cashed in on their government experience. But the cost wasn't just leaving the White House. It was leaving behind the legal protections that come with being a sitting government official. The moment she became a private citizen again, everything she'd done while in office became fair game for investigation. Congressional Democrats immediately launched inquiries. They argued that Ivanka had used her White House position to benefit her business interests, that she'd mixed official duties with personal profit, that foreign governments had funneled money to her companies while she was advising the president. She dismissed it all, called it a political witch hunt, said her business dealings were completely separate from her government work. Her legal team filed motions to block subpoenas, claiming executive privilege, arguing that her communications were protected. Ivanka gambled that investigators would eventually move on, that public attention would shift, that the legal challenges would fade away like they always had for her family before. She assumed the old playbook would work. Keep fighting in court, run out the clock, let the news cycle move to the next scandal. She assumed wrong. Because while she was fighting subpoenas in public, federal prosecutors were quietly building something else. They weren't going after her White House emails. They were following the money. And they found a witness who could connect every dot. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think former government officials should face stricter oversight of their business dealings? This is a question that goes way beyond one family, and I want to know where you stand on this. February 9th, 2026, 2:47 p.m. A black SUV pulled up to a side entrance of the federal courthouse in Manhattan. Out stepped Rebecca Morrison, Ivanka Trump's former chief of staff from her time in the White House. She wasn't there voluntarily. She was there under subpoena, facing her own legal exposure, and she'd made a choice: cooperate or face prosecution. For 6 hours, Morrison sat across from federal prosecutors and a grand jury. No cameras, no press, just her immunity agreement, and 127 pages of documents she'd kept from her time working for Ivanka. The testimony centered on something specific: foreign consulting contracts. According to leaked details from sources familiar with the proceedings, Morrison described a system where Ivanka's companies would receive consulting fees from foreign entities, sometimes the same entities she'd met with in her official White House capacity. The amounts were staggering, Saudi Arabia, $23 million, UAE, $18 million, Qatar, $31 million, all paid to shell companies registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. But here's where it gets worse. While Morrison was testifying about these contracts, prosecutors were also presenting bank records, wire transfer authorizations, signature pages, and they showed something disturbing: dates. Contracts signed within weeks of White House meetings, payments processed days after Ivanka returned from official foreign trips, money flowing to her companies while she was still advising the president on Middle East policy. Morrison's testimony went further. She described conversations where Ivanka allegedly discussed keeping these deals quiet until after leaving office, where she instructed staff to route payments through multiple entities to obscure the original source, where she personally approved financial structures designed, in Morrison's words, to avoid triggering federal ethics reviews. The evidence summary from that testimony is devastating. Prosecutors now have 72 documented foreign transactions totaling $284 million. They have testimony from a direct witness who was in the room for key decisions. They have emails where Ivanka discussed timing these deals around her government service. And they have something else: text messages. Morrison kept them all. Screenshots of conversations between Ivanka and foreign representatives, sent from her personal phone while she was using government resources, discussing business deals in the same threads as policy matters. At 8:52 p.m., Morrison walked out of the courthouse. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't need to. By 9:15 p.m., the judge had issued the order: passport seizure, asset freeze on 3 shell companies, travel restriction to the Southern District of New York, immediate compliance required. According to sources inside the prosecutor's office who spoke to Reuters, the decision to move this aggressively came from the top. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York personally signed off on the passport seizure request. Why? Because Morrison's testimony revealed something prosecutors feared: flight risk. During her 6 hours of questioning, Morrison apparently told investigators that Ivanka had discussed moving assets overseas, that she'd explored citizenship options in countries without extradition treaties, that she'd asked Morrison to research what would happen if she simply left the United States and didn't come back. A sealed filing submitted to Judge Martinez reportedly includes this detail. Defendant has expressed interest in relocating to a jurisdiction beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement and has taken preliminary steps to facilitate such relocation. That's federal prosecutor language for she's planning to run. The emergency meeting that led to the passport seizure happened Sunday night. Present: 3 assistant U.S. attorneys, an FBI supervisory agent, and a representative from the Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section. The topic: whether to wait for additional evidence or move now. They looked at Morrison's testimony and the supporting documents. They looked at recent financial movements showing large transfers to foreign accounts. They calculated the risk of Ivanka boarding a private jet to a non-extradition country before they could stop her. The decision was unanimous: move immediately. One source described it this way: "We've seen this pattern before with high net worth defendants. They string out the process, they delay, and then one day they're gone. Private aviation makes it too easy. We had a narrow window, and we took it." Judge Martinez reviewed the motion at 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. The prosecutor's brief was 43 pages. It laid out the evidence, the flight risk assessment, and the legal justification. By 8:34 a.m., she'd signed the order. Let's break down what's really happening here. This isn't about politics. This is about leverage. Federal prosecutors are using a playbook they've refined over decades of white-collar cases. Step 1, flip someone close to the target. Check. Rebecca Morrison is cooperating. Step 2, use that testimony to freeze assets and restrict movement. Check. Passports seized, accounts frozen. Step 3, increase pressure until the target has to make a choice. Fight and risk losing everything, or negotiate. Ivanka can no longer travel internationally, which means she can't manage her overseas business interests. She can't access funds in the frozen accounts, which means her legal bills are piling up with no way to pay them. She can't leave New York, which means she's separated from her family in Florida. This shifts power completely from the defendant to the prosecution. Ivanka Trump went from running a global business empire to being confined to one judicial district in 48 hours. She's not just facing charges, she's living under restrictions that make it impossible to function normally. Legal analysts compare this to the tactics used in organized crime cases. The government doesn't just charge you. They dismantle your ability to fight back. They cut off your resources, limit your movement, isolate you from your support network. The legal ramifications extend beyond this one case. The precedent being set here is significant. If prosecutors can successfully argue that former government officials committed crimes by mixing public service with private profit, it opens the door to investigating every politician who's cashed in after leaving office. And there are a lot of them. The technical mechanics of the charges matter. Prosecutors are building a case around something called honest services fraud. It's a federal statute that makes it illegal to use your government position for personal enrichment. The key element they have to prove: Ivanka knew she was doing something wrong and did it anyway. That's where Morrison's testimony becomes crucial. She's not just saying deals happened, she's saying Ivanka deliberately structured them to avoid oversight, deliberately waited to disclose them, deliberately used her government role to secure them. That's not a mistake. That's intent. And intent is what turns questionable ethics into federal crimes. Here's what happens next, step by step. If Morrison's testimony holds up under cross-examination, prosecutors will likely bring additional charges. The current seizure is based on flight risk, but the underlying investigation involves potential violations of ethics laws, honest services fraud, and possibly money laundering if they can prove the shell companies were designed to hide the origin of funds. If additional charges come, that triggers a domino effect. Other former Trump administration officials who did similar consulting deals will face scrutiny. Congressional investigators will subpoena their records. The media will dig into every foreign payment. This case is being watched internationally. Foreign governments that paid these consulting fees are now exposed. Did they pay Ivanka because they wanted her services, or because they wanted access to her father? That question has diplomatic implications that extend far beyond one family. The broader impact on American politics could be substantial. If Ivanka Trump, daughter of a former president, can face criminal charges for post-government business deals, it sends a message to every elected official. Your actions have consequences that don't end when you leave office. Financial compliance experts are already advising their clients to review any consulting agreements made after government service. The IRS has reportedly increased scrutiny of foreign payments to former officials by 280% in the last year. This case is the most visible example, but enforcement is expanding across the board. For Trump's political allies, this creates a difficult situation. Do they defend Ivanka and risk being associated with potential criminal conduct? Do they stay silent and appear disloyal? Do they distance themselves and fracture the coalition? Early signs suggest fracturing is already happening. Several Republican senators declined to comment when asked about the passport seizure. Former Trump cabinet members who usually rush to defend the family have been notably quiet. Even conservative media outlets are being careful with their coverage, presenting it as a legal matter rather than a political attack. That silence is strategic. If this case results in convictions, no one wants to be on record defending it. The political calculation is cold. Ivanka Trump is no longer worth the risk. The passport seizure isn't just a legal maneuver. It's a symbol. It represents the moment when wealth and connections stopped being enough to stay above the law. You can hire the best lawyers money can buy, but you can't litigate your way out of a cooperating witness who knows where all the bodies are buried. You can claim political persecution, but you can't spin away bank records that show exactly where the money came from and where it went. You can rely on your family name, but that name doesn't mean much when you're confined to one judicial district while your business empire crumbles overseas. The reality is this: federal prosecutors don't seize passports unless they believe they have a strong case. They don't freeze assets unless they think those assets are connected to criminal activity. They don't move this fast unless they're confident they can win. So where does Ivanka Trump stand right now? Legally isolated, financially restricted, politically abandoned. She's in New York, unable to travel, unable to access significant portions of her wealth, unable to speak freely about her case because of the gag order the judge imposed. Her legal team is fighting on multiple fronts, challenging the passport seizure, fighting the asset freeze, trying to get the gag order lifted. But each of those battles takes time and money, both of which are running short. As we move into the next phase, expect the prosecution to increase pressure. They'll leak additional details from Morrison's testimony. They'll file new motions revealing more evidence. They'll signal to Ivanka's lawyers that a plea deal is available if she cooperates against others, possibly including her father. But here's what can't be undone: the precedent. Once a judge agrees that a former White House advisor can be treated like a flight risk, that a passport can be seized based on business dealings after government service, that standard applies to everyone. This case will be studied in law schools as an example of how prosecutors dismantle white-collar defendants. It will be referenced in every future case involving former government officials and foreign money. It will shape how politicians think about their post office careers for the next generation. The Trump family's legal shield is gone. The assumption that political connections would protect them has been shattered. What we're witnessing is the moment when the rules changed. Make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. Wednesday, February 11th, we have a status conference where the judge will rule on Ivanka's motion to modify travel restrictions. Thursday, the grand jury reconvenes to hear additional evidence. Friday, prosecutors have indicated they may file supplemental charges. This story is moving fast, and every development matters. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the breakdown when these events happen. Where we are: Ivanka Trump, passport seized, assets frozen, movement restricted to New York. Rebecca Morrison, cooperating witness, immunity granted, additional testimony expected. Federal prosecutors, evidence compiled, pressure mounting, timeline accelerating. What we're watching: can Ivanka's legal team successfully challenge these restrictions? Will Morrison's testimony lead to additional cooperating witnesses? How will this impact the broader Trump family legal situation? The answers are coming. The timeline is compressed. The stakes couldn't be higher. This is the biggest legal threat the Trump family has faced, and it's not slowing down. It's accelerating. Stay informed. Stay ahead of the headlines. Subscribe now, because when the next document drops, when the next witness flips, when the next shoe falls, you'll want to understand what it means before everyone else figures it out. This is the new reality, and it's just getting started.